Welcome back to We Care a Lot. I'm half the pod, Sam.
I'm the other half, Mel.
Hey, y'all. Today's episode is like a little bit on the more serious side. I feel like we always give these like warnings when topics are heavy.
If it's heavy,
yeah,
and you don't want to listen, like totally get it.
Yeah.
But it is more of a sigh episode. Like, I just feel
a deep sigh, let it out.
But with that, like, obviously we're gonna have moments of
laughing
and having a good time. But
well, yeah, I think about our Scary Shit of Being a Woman episode. I'm like,
God.
Why are we laughing so
we're
much?
Laughing too much.
Cracking up. So don't fret. This isn't going to be like us coming to you and saying, this is an intervention. We think you're depressed. Maybe you are, and maybe you're not. Either way, I think learning about depression can be so helpful just in general to see other people. If you don't feel like you identify with depressive episodes or feelings of depression, for whatever reason you feel that way, a lot of people in your life might. And I think it's really important to understand what's going on. So yeah.
Yeah.
That being said, we're not experts. Disclaimer.
Disclaimer, we're not experts. This is very much speaking from experience, speaking from our own therapy and our own just perceptions, you know? So if your experience is not like this, that's completely okay. Fine.
Yeah.
I'm also not saying like, we're not sitting here saying that if you feel X, Y, and Z, you are depressed. I'm not someone to give a diagnosis.
No.
As much as I say that people are narcissists on this podcast, I cannot give a...
She can't actually
for certain say that somebody is something.
Correct.
So with that said, take everything with a grain of salt, but you may relate, so... Yeah. Moving on.
Also, this episode just seems really prevalent because it's getting colder. Slightly trying to lie to myself that it's getting colder because it's not.
It kind of is.
I mean,
this morning I was cold.
It's like 71 degrees until 12 o'clock 1. And then it's like cool 78. But, you know, the fall, the winter vibes, we're trying to get ahead of it. And just like, it's always nice to get ahead of those feelings, other than you being fully immersed in them, and then you're like, fuck, it's dark and cold outside, and I'm sad.
I think right now I feel like I've been like not in and out of an episode, but like I've been like teetering into like feeling things of it, and I definitely feel like for me depression's all year long, but I do feel like in the colder months, I have a lot more of a struggle just for like environmentally like purposes. Like I just feel like colder weather just also puts a certain trigger to me. But with that said, like seasonal depression's real.
Yeah.
And depending on where you live, obviously if you live in California, in LA and specifically, like the weather doesn't get bad or not even, it never gets bad.
Yeah.
But it definitely gets cooler and you feel the shift.
Yeah.
And for a place that doesn't, like people say doesn't have seasons, I think it still does, okay?
I mean, born and raised in California, so it's seasons to us.
For others, it might just be like it's always spring or it's always fall. Like
maybe that's the hack. I mean, you did live in Seattle for a year, so you got to experience that vibe.
It was atrocious.
Exactly.
For me. Like,
and then you came back to California, wasn't it like,
it's so, it
wonderful.
was nice.
And then
I'm
you're
like,
used to it again.
And then I'm like, oh yeah,
okay.
Back to the...
Not the hack.
Not the hack. Maybe for a year.
Yeah.
But yeah, with that said, like, I feel like there's that time that's going to come and you're just like, if you know that you get like a certain way.
Yeah.
During
It doesn't
season,
even have to be seasonal either. It's like like aside from it being cooler in California, it's like Christmas and Thanksgiving,
holidays,
family.
The holidays
lots of triggers.
Be triggers as well. Or even if like you just have a certain month where you really had a traumatic experience, that also becomes a trigger at some point. And this episode is just going to be like a roundabout of all of that. Like just kind of not necessarily preparing, but I think that's like kind of where our headspace is of like, we know something's on the rise for ourselves. So it's like,
I'm sensing.
It feels like the right conversation to have at the moment.
Yeah.
But yeah. Anyway, this episode's about depression if you haven't fucking noticed at this point.
I was gonna say take a shot every time we say depression, but that's probably bad.
Not on the depression episode, girly. Wait till glowing hour.
Hug somebody every time we say depression.
Oh,
that's nice. But that's a lot of hugs, babe.
We're gonna say it a lot.
Yeah, so I guess like starting off with our own personal experience of depression, like who wants to go first, class? I don't care.
I feel like I've spoken about it on the podcast before. It's something very prevalent in my life, like kind of a constant. I will say that and I think I said this too before, but like the moment that I had seen a therapist and they told me like, and you know, for everyone has their own like perceptions and journeys and whatever. A lot of people think that like getting clinically diagnosed or like even saying that you're depressed is like a bad thing. For me, it was extremely like freeing. All of my life, like I feel like I've had depressive episodes and I just never knew what they were, nor was I educated on depression. It just like wasn't a thing. Kids these days are so, I get like there's a lot that comes with like the internet that adds to maybe depression, but it's also like so nice and freeing to know that you live in a world where this information is at your fingertips.
I could see the double-edged sword of that being like maybe like oversimplifying depression or like mental health in general. Like kids will, I'm depressed. Like it just diminishes the value of the word. Yeah. But also, of course, there's so many good benefits of it.
Yeah. So like with that said, like the moment that I was told or like, you know, diagnosed, it was freeing because I was like, I have never been able to really grapple what this was, nor like, I feel like also sometimes like getting a diagnosis or like understanding the symptoms also creates like an action plan for you to know what to do when things happen, you know, versus like I was in the dark and
it felt like probably endless.
Felt like I was just different and like I just couldn't, like I was abnormal almost and or dramatic. And like depression in combination with anxiety is one hell of a fucking drug, let me tell you.
Not the drug.
So when that happened, I feel like it was just so important for me. I felt super like supported and like less alone just by the diagnosis, which is like not everyone wants to hear that. Yeah. That's not your own journey. For me, it was freeing. I definitely don't like go and be like, I'm just like depressed, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I'm still constantly trying to work on.
You're not using it as like a crutch. Of like whatever then. Yeah.
So,
which I don't think anyone maybe,
but like I don't know. See, that's like the world of the internet that it's like kind of funny to me, like kind of funky. But anyway, yeah, that's like my history with depression. For me, I go through episodes quite often, less so now. I think as I'm growing older, I'm definitely like recognizing the tools and the things that help me kind of stop one from fully like emerging or like becoming an episode. Like I'll have a depressive like time and then I'm like, okay. And I really work on getting myself into a space that doesn't necessarily feel that way. I'm also, disclaimer, I'm not medicated. I have grappled with the idea of it. I'm not there yet, and I think that like it might help a lot of people, but for me, I don't really want to have something I depend on in that way. And that might be torturous sometimes, and I can see how it could really benefit me in some other ways, but at the moment, I don't necessarily feel like that's the right path for me. That could change, and I'm not saying that that's like the wrong path for anybody. It's just like for me personally, that's just how I feel. Yeah, and I don't know, I feel like everyone's way of feeling depression is so different as well. So like for me, it's a different type of feeling in its specific experience, I guess, for like that episode or whatever, but like a lot of the time I just like don't really know who I am.
You mean as opposed to just feeling like sad,
right? Like I just feel like
you can identify the difference between
sadness is different for me. It feels like two different words. Yeah, it's just like it's just like this heaviness that like just doesn't go away. Like it's like this, I know like weighted blankets are really good for you, but it feels like a weighted blanket that you just like can't remove.
Yeah, then that's not fun anymore.
No.
A weighted blanket you can't take off.
It's not cozy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I just like, I genuinely just feel like not myself.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the time, especially in an episode or when an episode's emerging, I can't even like identify who I was. So then that becomes like really anxiety ridden for me, because then I'm like, I'm just like living life and I maybe like I'm not doing right. I'm not doing it right. And I'm like spiraling. And then it becomes like this whole big thing for me.
Yeah.
So like that's my experience with depression. And like it's been a very long, hard journey to realize the certain things that like help and don't help, or like, and honestly being really real with myself of like, sometimes you're doing things that are just digging yourself deeper in that hole. But yeah. Anyway, what was your experience like?
First, I want to ask you, or well, I know the answer, but you were diagnosed later in life, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was 21.
Yeah.
When I was diagnosed.
Just for the people
that
don't know. Because I'm pretty sure I don't know what episode we talked about that.
Yeah, I don't remember. Something.
That seems way before off.
But
whatever, we did. Okay, yeah. I feel like that's helpful. Because also just like, you literally went through your entire adolescence. The hardest years of our lives, arguably.
Not knowing what the fuck is like, wrong. Or how to cope, I guess, even.
Yeah. I remember when you found out, I was like, that's so validating.
It is.
Like, wow.
It was literally, like, eye-opening for me. And I don't know if, like, everybody has this kind of experience. Hopefully you don't. But, like, in terms of, like, my family, very Mexican, very, like, I wouldn't say, like, necessarily super traditional. But, like, mental health is not what it is now. Like, and that's, like, I'm sure even past my years, like, has been even worse.
Yeah.
But, like, especially with, like, my parents, they didn't really know how to, like, handle that, or like
seeing you go through things, they just were like, I don't know how to help.
Yeah.
Not in a bad way necessarily, but just I feel confused.
It's confusing. And then, like, for me, it was also like I feel like my entire, like, immediate family is dealing with some sort of, like, mental health disorder or issue. And so growing up, watching, like, my brothers go through their own depressive episodes of, like, what now I also, like, I'm not diagnosing them. This, like, I guess I am, but, like, I'm more so just saying, like, I genuinely can see, like, the similarities. And so going and seeing them go through it, and then, like, being told to just go, like, help them be happy was, like, really counterintuitive and also kind of, like, super detrimental to me, which, like, in that sense, I'd also, like, lessened the importance of, like, what they were going through, or, like
they just need you to be around to be happy. It's like, well,
yeah. And then, like, but then I'm like, who's around me to make me happy? It was just, and that's just, like,
they're trying the best,
whole other sector of things. But yeah, it just, like, watching them go through it just, like, and then being now able to say, like, or to be validated in my experience. I'm not, like, dramatic. I'm not just, like, being moody. Like, you know, like, it's just much more than that. And that was also helpful for me to, like, see the world in that way, where, like, now when I, like, see the things that my parents go through and the episodes or the feelings and the moods that they have, it's easier for me to, like, support and understand versus just, like, having the same outlook of them telling me that I'm just you're going through a little, like, hard patch, you know. It's like, no, girl,
you said this is cyclical, babe.
This is cyclical. It happens often. Let's just take a step back.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I think mental health has come a long way, as a society love to talk about.
For real.
But yeah, I don't think I ever talked about mental health in my household. Ever,
right?
Diddly squat, never. I don't think we ever used the word mental health.
It wasn't a thing.
Or, like, anxiety, depression.
No.
It was just the big, sad, mad, happy, you know? Those are the feelings we discussed. Which, like, I mean, no knock to that generation of parents, but it's
But then it's, like, the same. It's, like, then
that
generation is, like, the same generation that's, like, saying, well, everyone's now depressed. Like, you know, like, you guys are just sad. You just don't know the difference. It's like, well, maybe we all were depressed and you don't know because you know. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you know, and then the next generation, we're going to be fucking up our kids because of X, Y, and Z. Because we're like diagnosing them with, no, baby, you just have anxiety, baby. Let's go get meds. Like, and then we're going to over-medicate. That's also an issue.
That's also an issue. We're not going to get there.
Yeah, we're not going to get into that. Yeah, so my experience is just like never discussing mental health or it being a topic of discussion for my family. I think the first time I had really talked about it with my like mom or dad, both, whatever, I decided to start going to therapy. And then all of a sudden it was like, oh yeah, like someone else in our family goes to therapy, and I was like, what? And then yeah, they've been going since they were in their 20s, and I'm like, okay, like why haven't we talked about this? And like it's always been more of a joke, like, oh, your brother's a hypochondriac, or like your sister's just like, my sister's like, my sister's what? I'm just Crystal, I love you. I genuinely couldn't come up with anything. I just didn't want to throw only Eddie under the bus. But yeah, like it was a joke, like, oh, don't tell Eddie because he's a hypochondriac. I'm like, that's literally a disorder.
Like this poor man.
I'm like, my brother's literally struggling with this. And it's a joke, which, like, you know, all in good fun, I guess. Like, if he's cool with it, and it's like a whatever. But, you know, not much.
Dude, is a hypochondriac like a form of OCD?
I think
it
so.
Is, right? It makes sense.
I don't know for sure what it's like classified as, but yeah,
that would make sense.
You're just scared of being sick, essentially, or like getting sick.
It's just like the intrusive thought of.
Yeah.
Anyway,
so yeah, I just didn't really have much of a gauge on depression specifically, since that's what we're talking about. And yeah, so I like definitely have felt really sad. I personally don't know if I can say I've been depressed or I feel like probably, but I've never been to a therapist that diagnosed me with it or told me that I was suffering from a depressive episode or anything. So I can't really say for certain. I would say one big memory I have is when I was on birth control, the pill, the evil little
literally
pill. Maybe that's pill. What we were talking about. I don't know. When we talked about when you were diagnosed. I don't know.
Was I on the pill then?
I feel like we talked about it. I feel like it's coming back because we were talking about IUDs in the same exact conversation.
Maybe you're right.
I remember us walking literally. I remember where we were. So weird. It's so random. Anyways. So I was just going through it. I just remember feeling literally insane. I didn't feel like myself. I was constantly like anxious and sad and worried. And there wasn't really a cause for it. And we've talked about like, was it the birth control or the boyfriend at the time? Right? I don't know.
Love honey.
And maybe they were also making me depressed. I have no idea.
Cause of depression?
Boyfriend. That is so wrong. Definitely not true, but like kind of true.
Could be.
But like kind of true.
Could be trigger.
I don't know. And I've actually recently talked to somebody about it, like not a doctor, but like just a person. And they were like, oh, were you depressed? And I was like, that's such like, a straightforward question. And I was like,
well, because it's a difference, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, yeah. I was like, that's a really good question. Like, I don't know.
Like, I can't identify it.
I wouldn't be able to tell you if I was or not. Maybe.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my experience with depression. I don't know much about her.
In terms of like I mean, for me, like my anxiety and my depression, like they're fucking homies, dude. Oh, they're like sisters. Like
not sisters.
They're in a pact. I also was not diagnosed with like anxiety disorder necessarily, because I definitely at the time was more so focused on like my depression side of it. I feel like you also have not been diagnosed, but I do think that we both are very I'm gonna just say anxiety ridden people.
Yeah.
With that said, like I feel like even the word anxiety, even that being like a self-proclaimed diagnosis, I feel like has been helpful in some forms. I won't say like in a lot of ways. It doesn't
cure it.
It doesn't cure it. It's not like, oh my god, it's gone.
Yeah.
But I feel like even like when we like first met, I feel like neither of us really used that terminology.
Right, yeah.
Do you like now recognize like the times that you were anxious like then?
Back then.
Yeah. Like do you
Yeah, definitely. I feel like if maybe what you're getting at is like, if I resonate with anxiety without being diagnosed, maybe I don't have depression. Are we linking the two?
No, I was just asking
because I feel like maybe that's valid. Because like I would just feel it.
Yeah. No, I was mostly just asking because like I just can remember us in those like in that time, and like you be like I could now be like, yeah, she was anxious, fucking an anxious person.
No, dude, I remember one time. Get this. I didn't tell you I was anxious, and you knew something was up, but I was like, I'm not gonna tell her because then it's real.
Literally. What, girl?
So I ran a light on the way to come get you because we carpooled. So I ran a light on accident and a car almost hit me. And I was so scared. I was like mortified. I was like this the rest of the fucking day. And I was Googling like, are the fucking ticket lights on this street, on this cross street? I was so scared I was gonna get a ticket. I don't know why I was so scared. I was like, bitch, if you get a ticket, you get a ticket. Literally. And the answer was literally like, girl, if you get a ticket, you get a ticket. The light could be off, the light could be on. And so I'm just sitting there Googling shit, and then you come out of class and like, you're like, are you good? And I was like, fine. And like, little did I know, had I just been like, yeah, dude, I probably am gonna get a fucking ticket and I'm anxious about it, you could have had an answer like, girl, I know that light doesn't work. And I would have been like, anything. Period, anxiety like, gone.
You get a ticket, then what, girl?
Exactly. A conversation, and I would have been fine. But in those moments, I didn't know how to identify that I was even anxious. Yeah. You know? I wasn't like, I was just like, I'm worried about this ticket. Like, you know?
And I think that that's when I say, like, the diagnosis is so helpful. Or even just, like, knowing what the term is.
What you can call it.
And we can call it.
It's like putting a name to that bitch.
It literally, like
fuck you.
Fuck you, bitch. Yeah.
I agree, though,
you know? It's helpful.
Kind of makes me sad for, like, old us. Like,
it's
really
sad.
Was struggling.
I was struggling, dude.
God.
Fuck.
Yeah, diagnosis. Kiss on the cheek. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I know you, like, said that you're not gonna necessarily call it what it is because you don't know. And that's okay. But what are some of like the symptoms that you feel like would align that like you felt that you're like, oh, that makes me think that it could have been, or like, why did that person say, were you depressed? Like, what were the symptoms or the common signs that you were like thinking about?
Well, like the birth control thing, like when I was saying that story, like I didn't feel like myself. But I also just chalked that up to the hormones that were in my system. I mean, which I could still cause depression. Right. So like hormone changes, definitely one of those kind of things to look out for if you notice signs of depression, I guess. Which like, yeah, I think genuinely I probably was depressed at that time because I was acting out. I was being mean to people, like my family. My boyfriend I was probably being short with. Because I was mad at him for maybe no reason, maybe like holding on to something that happened a long time ago,
like,
or whatever.
Be on these fucking pills,
like literally. Go cut your schnapp.
Just fucking tie that tube, bro.
Yeah, so I think that's probably that. When I was talking to that person, I feel like I was more so talking about like family stuff and like feeling just like really down about it.
Yeah,
I don't think I like really used like a lot of descriptors. Maybe I said something along the lines of like, I just felt like really down and like sad for like a long period of time, and maybe that's why, because like the period of time thing for depression being so important.
Was I around for this time?
Yeah, and I don't think I actually have experienced like anything other than the birth control thing.
I mean, I can
because I feel like grief and sadness can last a long time and come in and out.
For sure.
You know?
Yeah.
So that's why I kind of am like...
That's also a very tricky thing, like the grief in conjunction with like depression. Like, what is what? I guess like one can become the other and
or coexist at the same time.
That's what I'm trying to say.
One can become the other.
So that's difficult. But I mean, because like grief, I would assume has similar signs.
Yeah.
Because I do feel like there was like, and not to say that I was like, oh, like she's gotta fix something.
Oh,
but
she
like
depressed.
It definitely felt like there was like a lack of motivation and like a constant like, it was almost like numbness, but then to the point where like if you if I mentioned or we talked slightly about this one thing, like your eyes would well up like immediately, you know?
Yeah.
It was like something bursting almost, but like also felt so numb. You know what I mean? So I don't know. I guess like I could see how the two
might not exactly
like it could be very similar. Yeah.
And like I was in therapy at the time.
Yeah.
So I don't really think.
Well, I think also you being like proactive in getting into therapy probably led you to a path of like not having a full-blown episode.
True.
I think maybe you might have been teetering in some depressive feelings.
Yeah, that's also my question, like I guess whenever I get back into therapy would be like, so because like there's depressed people, question mark, like people who are just not always suffering with depression, but just like they're always, it's always something that they're gonna have type of thing, right? Is that a thing?
People can have moments and stints in time where it's just like you had a depressive
episode. Right? But
you don't have to be like somebody who's like struggling forever. Like I think when you have when you've had depression, there's always a chance of it coming back. But
okay,
you know what I mean? It's
so it's
not
not
like
necessarily...
somebody it's not like me where it's like every other month,
girl.
No, but like
that's my question, I guess. Like people who are more prone to depression, it doesn't necessarily mean like necessarily you're a forever depressed person. It's just like you're more aware of the signs and like preventing and treating.
Yeah, which is why like the whole grief thing like was a big question in my mind right now, because like I feel like a lot of people who do grieve do end up having like a depressive I don't want to call it stint, but like a point in time, and then they move out of it, and like the grieving is, in my opinion, it's forever. Yeah, you go through like cycles of it or whatever, but it doesn't necessarily mean like this intense sadness or even like this intense depression. It's just like a feeling that like comes and goes, and like a remembrance. Yeah, it's like slightly different, but I feel like depression can be like a one-time thing, and then like something else happens to you, and then like you might get into an episode or not. You know what I mean? It doesn't mean like,
because I feel like there's this stigma of depression, of it being like either you're a person who can get depressed or you're a person who can't.
I feel like everyone
isn't that a stigma? Am I crazy for that?
Well, that is a stigma. I think so.
Like I think people are like, oh, depression. Yeah, I've never had it, so I'm never gonna get depressed.
I feel like
that's just can't be.
I'm just gonna say this. I feel like brain chemistry is so interesting to the point where like anything can really affect like your brain chemistry, and like the way that your neural pathways, like those things, new ones can be added, but also old ones, like things can get destroyed. Any like slight alteration to your brain chemistry can create a fucking action of depression. It can happen to anybody.
Yeah, I think it's like that's the biggest stigma when it comes to depression for me, that it like sticks out. Like when people talk about depression, I feel like it comes off very much like I'm a person who doesn't get depressed.
Doesn't mean you can't.
But also like there is the stigma of depression being like, oh my god, that's like an eternally sad person you don't want to be around or something. Yeah. Like I feel like people
that's also true.
Yeah, and it's not true, because obviously for anything, someone with anger problems, someone with fucking like can't take the world seriously problems because they're too happy all the fucking time, like it's about being a well-rounded, balanced person who understands the things that maybe they need to work on or need a little more support in, whatever it is. I feel like it's just not fair, depression aside, like anything, we all have our things.
Yeah, that's fair.
So ridiculous.
But that's a good point, that like both of those like two stigmas or like misconceptions about depression really exist.
It deters people also from saying that they've ever been depressed.
Yeah.
Like I almost feel like, weirdly, I know my mom watches and like listens, so I'm like, is my mom gonna be like, you've been depressed before? Like it's a thing, but I'm like, but it's not a thing.
But like, it's like, yeah, and because it becomes like a thing like that, I also feel like, and I feel especially when I'm in an episode, I feel like I should not
like tell people
or like even like I should try to act differently, because if not, somebody's gonna like just either be weird about it or like think I'm like, I don't know, I think
make
like
you feel
also
some
like
way.
I think it's maybe just like the older generation, but I feel like around them, whenever like a mental health terminology is used, it becomes like this thing where I feel like they either like think you're like a crazy person or you're like kind of like broken,
or like using it as a crutch,
or using it as a crutch. It's like one of the three, and like it's kind of shitty. Like it's so invalidating.
Yeah.
But yeah,
interesting saying that you don't want to like let people in, because I could see that like even when I'm anxious, not letting you in was so much worse for me, though.
Yeah.
It was so much worse for me at the end of the day. Instead of just saying, hey, I feel really anxious right now. I don't even have to tell you why, but just, I feel really anxious right now. You could have been like, oh, let's go get a coffee. Not a coffee.
Oh, girl.
Let's go get a smoothie.
Like a tea.
Whatever. Yeah. And like telling people you feel depressed, like it allows people to meet you where you're at.
Yeah.
Instead of them expecting you to be like yourself.
Myself.
And then you're not, and we're like, why are you not? Is something wrong? Are you fighting with someone? Are you hungry? Are you like, you just start being, are you on your period?
Yeah.
Like all these fucking stereotypical assumptions.
Yeah.
And instead of just being like, honestly, I just not feeling my best today.
My best today. I feel like that's kind of how like the opposite is what I used to do. And like lately I'm just like, I don't give a fuck. I'm just going to put myself first and like tell people what I'm like, how I am. And if you want me fucking around, you want me fucking around. If you don't, I don't give a shit. If you think I'm fucking crazy, that's fine too. Like it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Speaking about periods, just like self-diagnosing again, PMDD.
Oh yeah.
That was an interesting thing to discover along with like my depression, I guess. Is just like weird because like again,
what does
like,
PMDD stand for again? It's
like, girl,
we're not scientists.
PMDD, premenstrual dysphoric disorder.
That sounds scary.
I'm still like wondering if I like fully have that.
Who can diagnose that? Is that like a gynecologist?
I think it's a gynecologist. I'm actually just got myself Tia. I wish this was sponsored by Tia, but it's not.
Why do we have all these amazing sponsorship opportunities?
And anyway, sad moment. But I just signed up for Tia, and I'm excited for my first appointment.
Nice.
It's virtual.
Is it only gyno?
Or no, it's primary and gyno.
Oh, okay, nice.
They just like focus on like people with vaginas.
We literally need a sponsorship, anyways. I'm like over here, like, oh my god, is it only gynecologist? No, it's primary. Fuck.
And they work with the pharmacy capsule, which is
pharmacy
cool.
capsule.
What's like that? The pharmacy dash. Their name is Capsule.
Okay.
Got it. But yeah, so I like had gone to this naturopathic, not doctor, I guess, recently, where like I had gotten like acupuncture. I haven't been in a minute, which I should go back. I was telling her like all of these symptoms that I had, and I was like, I think I have endometriosis, like I think I have PMDD, because like the things that like don't WebMD shit, but also it was helpful, okay?
Well, because then you could bring it up to a doctor.
Right.
It's not like I'm diagnosed now. It's more like, that's weird. These things are lining up.
Yeah.
Let me bring it to a professional.
So she was just like saying like the PMDD part is probably a little more real than the endometriosis. Like she's like, I really hope you don't have endometriosis, and I think you should stop saying that you like do, because obviously like we're all like woo woo at that place anyway. So like she's like, you're gonna like bring it upon yourself. True. And she's just like, there's all these other things, there's all these other symptoms that you would probably see and have if you did have endometriosis. So whatever. So we were talking about that, and I just like want to fully explore
you want
my
the validation
uterus.
Also of like, I have it
or I don't, because I need an action plan, and I'm sick and tired of having these like very fucking intense periods.
It's just not fair for yourself. Like I want to live my life.
Yeah. But yeah, like the PMDD thing, like there's like a few, this might be like TMI, whatever. My mom doesn't listen, and hi Susanna, I know you listen. It's not like TMI like weird like that, it's just more TMI of like mental. Anyway, I had gone like 3 or 4 months where, I mean, I've always like felt like intense sadness. I don't even know if I want to call it depression, because
it was different for you.
It was different.
Yeah.
And it was like a lot of anxiety too.
Was this like recent?
Yeah,
long time ago.
More recent.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like I go through periods where like periods where like some are really, really fucking intense, and other ones are like, for me, on the mild side, even though like my body's going through it mentally, I'm also going through it. But like, I think it was like 5-ish months ago, I was like in a very like constant cycle of having like really, really intense bad thoughts
While on your period.
while on my period. Oh no, right before. It's like it's like the 10 days before your period is when the PMDD really kicks in. And then for some people, it like literally stops immediately when you're bleeding, like when you start bleeding.
All of a sudden you're like, maybe it's like a validation thing, like it was my period.
Kind of, I guess, but
I
like
don't know. Or
something happens within like your hormones in your fucking brain that like, I don't know. I was just having these really intense, scary thoughts about like, not necessarily like, I don't want to say that I was like suicidal because that's not like the right wording, but like,
You thought about death.
I thought about death a lot and wanting to be dead, but not like having
Suicidal
a plan
plans. Yeah.
or anything. It was just more so like I would be driving and I'd be like I could just like die right now, and that's like completely okay. And I kind of like, if that happens, like I kind of want that. Like it was like I don't even know how to explain it. It's just,
yeah, I get what you're
saying.
It
was just like very dark thoughts, and like it was to the point where like I started scaring myself. Like, am I like suicidal? Like this is not right. And that's when I got to like Googling of like, is this like something that happens? You know? And then, the PMDD thing came up, and I'm like, that makes a lot of sense for me.
It's literally so niche, also.
It's niche.
Like, our lives are so niche. But
such a niche
is
person.
it not so niche? Like, to be like, I'm not suicidal, but I'm thinking about death. Like, if Barbie came out this time that you were going through this, you would have been like,
what is happening?
Thoughts about death.
Yeah.
Crazy. But, like, it's
really strange.
Yeah.
And also, like, I think a lot of these things, to each their own about what you think about life and like diagnosis and fucking disease or whatever. I genuinely feel that like a lot of things come from like generation, like obviously genetics for sure, but also like generations of like generational trauma. I feel like that is so real. And like when I look at the way that my periods are, I definitely see it as a sign to generational like woman trauma in my life and like the lineage of my family. And like growing up, my mom had such intense periods like me, and I just thought like, I just literally wrote it off as like my mom had them so bad, and like women take on like whatever, you know, just you take on whatever like is in the family genetics. But like looking back, like I think it's so real that like my mom probably had PMDD as well. Like the way she would speak about her life, either like right before her period or during her period, was just like really intense. And then like she would get over it.
Yeah.
And then you're like, okay, that was like a lot.
For you as a kid.
Yeah,
you're like,
are you good,
like,
ma'am?
Whoa.
So,
and for her, not knowing.
Yeah, not knowing
like,
what the hell's going on.
Yeah.
She's, TMI, probably like not perioding anymore.
Not perioding.
What? But like,
I love that.
And like now she feels free, and we talked about that recently, and she was just like, you know, menopause is its own thing, but like I feel so fucking freed like from not having my period anymore.
Not having chills.
And I'm like, dude,
Weird.
like that is so crazy that like we're sharing this experience. Like I don't like that I like am going through the things you go, like obviously I don't express it the same way for many different reasons,
tools and whatnot.
different reasons and like coping mechanisms, but like it's so fucking nuts. Anyway, this is like a fucking tangent about PMDD,
we got on periods,
but,
but very relevant to depression if you be bleeding.
We be bleeding, bro. Yeah.
You kind of briefly spoke on your symptoms of like just not feeling like yourself.
Yeah. I definitely sleep a lot during or like I'm tired constantly. Someone said that like having fear and depression, having anxiety and depression is like having a fear of failing, but like having no fucking motivation to do anything about it.
It's whack.
And that's
like
why
how
I feel.
Why?
It's just fucking awful.
Why can't the chemistry of our brains just
like fix
nice?
yourself, bitch? But yeah, if you feel like you've had any like signs of depression, if they persist for, this is what my therapist said to me, if they persist for longer than 2 weeks, then that's considered an episode. At that point, I hope before that, but like at that point, I would definitely reach out to somebody to help, because it's not, a lot of the time, depression is all consuming and literally should get paid for, because it feels like a fucking job to deal with. But like, you can't do it alone. Sometimes you just can't, especially when like, if you've never gotten like professional help, it's just so hard to try to do with an episode.
Just lost. No, if you have no hope, sense of tools and validation of where you're at.
So yeah,
honestly, just talking to people helps.
I think so.
I mean, sometimes pick the right person,
right? But yeah, for sure,
you don't have to do it alone. Is what we're trying to say, essentially.
I would say, okay, so defining depression, not to actually define, but I feel like the way that people actually state, like, knowing that something is depression versus like sadness is when it affects your life. If it affects your ability to work, live in any kind of way, that is when you're most likely in a depressive time, at least, is what I'm trying to say. Like, if it's hindering your way of life, whether that's, like I said, like work or your relationships with people, if you feel like you're isolating yourself a lot, your physical well-being, if you're not eating, if you're not sleeping correctly, like all of those things are signs and symptoms of depression.
I'm like, wait a minute.
Wait a damn minute.
Maybe girl has.
Girl. A big one for me, like when I'm in a depressive state, I will have like bad insomnia. Like bad.
That's the worst.
And then I feel tired all day, which is like so not helpful.
Yeah.
But again, like if you're feeling these signs, these symptoms, whatever you want to call them, for sure see a therapist. Also, just I think try to find support in some form. If you can't go to a therapist, find a friend to talk to. Find something to pull you out of the space that you're in.
Coping mechanisms and things that bring you joy. Try to fall back in love with certain things, whatever it is that you enjoy doing, working out, a sport, art, cooking, hanging out with friends. Try and like push yourself out of your comfort zone in that moment, even for just a little bit. Call somebody. A big thing that I heard was, which I thought this was super helpful, I don't know if it is for whoever's listening, but in times of depression, stop listening to yourself and instead talk to yourself. By that, what I mean is, don't like stop taking these depressive thoughts or even anxious thoughts. Like you're being talked at.
Yeah, don't like listen to those. Like stop agreeing or even allowing it to be a space. Obviously easier said than done, but I'm just saying in general, like that's where the problem lies, is like listening to the lies that your brain is feeding, and instead try to talk yourself into something else. You know,
question these thoughts,
tell yourself the opposite. And I know at first, and listen, for me, I feel like I'm such a like person who tries to like tell people like, yeah, you know, meditate, do your affirmations, and journal.
Be like a super spiritual, amazing person every day.
For sure. And I genuinely believe that. But in my times of depression, girl, I'm not there. I'm like, none of that's gonna fucking work for you, stupid bitch. Like, none of it. You're here with me. Like, literally, I love Big Mouth because their characters are so
Who's depression again?
The kitty.
It's the cat.
She, like, comforts you and, like, literally makes you feel like shit, but also she's, like, there.
She's like a cunt. Like that bitch.
Yeah. And, like, literally, that's how it fucking feels. And then Miss fucking Anxiety Mosquito right here. She's so fucking annoying. But she's really, like, just scaring me the whole time.
She's on point.
It's just... But anyways, like, I know in those moments, affirmations don't fucking feel real. Like, they're gonna fucking work. But also, what do you have to fucking lose?
Yeah, just try it.
Just say your little silly words every day. See if you feel anything after a while.
That's the depression literally speaking to you. Try your little silly words. And you're like, okay.
I will.
Thanks for the reminder.
Yeah, literally. Anyway, so I've been saying affirmations in the morning and at night. The same one. Hopefully.
Yeah. Also, maybe it's a way to avoid falling into a depressive episode. It's not always when you're in it.
No.
You know?
Absolutely.
Preventative.
I definitely... That's something that I, like, am now learning is, like, the preventative care of it all. Mm-hmm. Versus, like, how to cope. It's like, how do we not... Sorry. Yeah. How do we not get to that point?
Yeah. Exactly. That's also what's so helpful about the diagnosis. You're like, I understand myself. Like, you know what I'm talking about? Putting us in those little boxes.
Put me in my little box.
Put me in that little box. In that little garage.
Girl.
Also, I had a random thought. Our inner monologue episode. Mm-hmm. I'm like, so if you're depressed, you have to have an inner monologue.
Absolutely.
Right? Like, there's no depressed person without an inner monologue. Or anxiety.
I don't think so. How fucking freeing. That's why I said how fucking nice. Must be fucking nice.
That's crazy.
This bitch is too loud sometimes.
There's got to be someone without an inner monologue and depression.
I need to know.
Well, or suffered with depression at some point.
God damn.
That's one interesting thought.
Interesting thought.
Let us know if you're one of those people.
This one's been a doozy, man.
Not too many sighs.
Not too many... No.
A few laughs. So hopefully this was a helpful episode. Insightful.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like this went better than I was expecting. In terms of terminology and like...
Listen, we probably said some dumb shit, but it's not my fault. This is just my experience.
These are just our experiences, okay?
I'm not saying that that's for everybody.
No, I feel like our friends can relate. And if our friends can relate, that means other people can probably relate too. So... please rate this podcast. That'd be amazing. Unless you hated this episode, please just move along. Don't rate us. But follow us on Instagram. Ooh, polls. We will definitely have a poll up for this episode. So check that out on Spotify, YouTube. Give us a like. Engage with us, please.
Oh, and listen. This is gonna be like kind of fucked up, but like a big thing that I think helps with depression, at least for me, is staying on routine. So stay listening to us weekly.
Ooh,
go on your little walk. Turn us on.
Ate her up. So. Wait them up. I don't know who you
are. Anyway,
yeah.
So stay tuned for Friday's episode for Glowing Hour.
Yeah. See you guys there.